Now, from the hysteria surrounding a potential government shutdown to the ongoing probe into the State Independence Party, there's actually more than enough to talk to the insiders about. They are the veterans of the political scene who join us each week to talk about the stories making news at the Capitol and also on the campaign trail. Joining us tonight from New York City is Richard Fife. He is the former campaign manager to Governor David Paterson. And in Albany is Bob Bellafiore, former press secretary to former Governor George Pataki, now a partner at Eric Mower & Associates. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us.
You bet.
So let's start with the budget shutdown that wasn't. Was it real, ever a real threat or not? Bob, you want to start?
Well, Liz, in your lead-in you used the word hysteria, and that's exactly what it was. I think in part it was a piece of hysteria, hypertension created to create some focus. I mean, I think the press went overboard in covering this possibility of state government being brought to the brink of shutdown. But I think it did have the beneficial effect of focusing the press and thus the public on just how late the budget is and how important it is for the legislature and the governor to get this thing done. Richard?
No, I think the governor deserves a lot of credit. I think he's brought a focus on the budget through the extenders. He has shown that the power the governor does have in this process and forced the legislatures to react to him. And I think he has created a focus on it that has brought parties together to look to solving the budget process.
Well, yes, and
the governor could have, when he decided not to run, to sit on the sidelines or curry favor with special interest, he instead has done what's right for the people of New York, and he deserves a lot of credit.
Oh, well, okay. So the governor said this morning, actually, much of what you just said, which is, I have the power, and I'm not a lame duck, and you guys are finally understanding that because you voted. The Republicans showed up. You know, there were 3 of them actually who crossed the aisle and voted with the Democrats to avert this government shutdown. I'm not so sure, though, and I'd like to know if you agree, Richie, with Bob's point, which is in fact this helping to get a budget deal? Because at this moment, we're not seeing any real movement. There's a leaders meeting tomorrow, and I guess we'll have to see what happens then, but there's no real budget deal in the offing that I can see. Lots of positive talk, but no actual deal.
Well, whether there's a deal or not, he's moved the process forward with a lot of the budget is getting passed through the extender bills. A lot of the cuts are getting through the extender bills, and it's moving a process forward. I mean, everybody was talking, and I think rightfully that the process was stalled, and now it's moving. So I think that's progress.
Okay, so the problem is, and Bob says actually that the press covered it too much, and perhaps we overhyped it a little bit, but really, I'm sorry, when you use a word like shutdown, and then you have agencies sending out all of these memos telling people who work there, many of them are viewers, oh, by the way, you might not show up for work tomorrow, I don't know how you overhype that.
Well, Liz, I don't think for a minute the legislature and the governor were ever going to let the government be shut down. I mean, let's look at it this way. Trying to do a budget like this is an exercise in pain avoidance, right? And the first level of pain is having to do all these cuts, okay? And the legislature decided, well, they didn't really want to accept that kind of pain, so they've delayed and delayed and delayed. The second level of pain is the political penalty of doing nothing. And I think they were so concerned about doing nothing that it might compel them to actually start doing some cuts because it's a little easier. But the worst level is the national embarrassment of shutting the place down. I think the governor was effective in creating the atmosphere of that kind of embarrassment, but I don't think anybody for a minute thought this government was going to shut down for 1 second. Now, about the process moving forward, I have seen more budgets in this town than I care to ever admit. These things go back and forth and fits and starts. They seem like they're making progress, and then they collapse. For the moment, I think this hasn't brought the parties together, but it's helped them understand that if they don't get this thing done, they could really pay for it in November. Now, how quickly that happens, I don't know. I mean, I think the next thing to look for is July 4th. That's the next moment when legislators really want to get out of town.
Right. Well, let me, before we leave this topic, I'm going to put you on the spot for a second, Richie, and I'm sorry. So I guess you can take a pass, a get out of jail free card, if you will, on this one. I'm going to offer it to you before I even ask. But there's a lot of editorial boards all over the state who are giving a lot of credit to Governor Paterson. You know, even the Post, who has been among his worst critics, the New York Post, giving him credit for finally stepping up to the plate and really doing this sort of unprecedented thing. They've gotten almost 70% of the budget finished. What took him so long to get settled into this role, or is it because he's unfettered, because he's not running for office, and as you noted, is no longer cares about what the special interests think?
Well, I think there's a lot of factors. I think we've seen this attack from the governor since last fall when he started dealing with the budget deficit. I think he's been strong, holding firm on what's right for New York. And remember, in a normal term, we'd be halfway through the governor's first term in office for a governor that was elected to a 4-year term. So I think the governor is doing what's right, and I think editorial boards and others are starting to see that also.
But, of course, he's not going to have any more time to play out. And also there are these ethics investigations that the former chief judge is doing at the bequest of the Attorney General, and so who at one point was going to be David Patterson's primary opponent. It all gets very complicated, which is a nice segue into politics, actually. We saw a really unusual case that happened yesterday. There was an indictment of a Queens GOP operative in connection with the State Independence Party. And today we see Andrew Cuomo, who has accepted this party's line, not backing down from it. Were you surprised by that? Rich, you want to start?
Well, I'm not surprised as a lawyer and someone who understands the process for him to say, let's wait and see. So far, the DA says it really is not involving the Independence Party, and let's see where it is. So I think the Attorney General did the right thing. I think the person who really looks hypocritical in it is Rick Lazio, who would have jumped up and down and would have loved to get the Independence Party line, but now is trying to use it in a different way. So I think in the end, it's the one who's looking political who's going to be hurt.
Well, before I turn to you, Bob, it should be noted, though, the DA, the Manhattan DA, Cy Vance Jr., actually didn't say, very pointedly didn't say during this press conference where he announced the indictment that the Independence Party was not, in fact, a target. He did pointedly say, in fact, that Mayor Bloomberg was not a target, which gave him the opportunity to say that the party was not. So it's a little gray, it seems to me. Bob?
Well, it seems to me in this whole thing where you have one of the most successful, richest business